we definitely couldn't do what they did for Brunelleschi's dome. They set out the dimensions of that church, and they were like, we can't build this right now. The dome is going to be larger than any dome that's ever been built. And the church father said, oh, that's okay. When it comes time to build the dome, God will show us how. Like, you can't do that now in architecture. You'll get sued. So we have an enormous, we have the weight of defining everything up front because it's a legal requirement of instructions. But what you're talking about is where we designed enough that said, what is it? Where is it? How is it assembled? But then people with experience and judgment said, I know you've got the detail to do it like this, but I think you might want to do this other thing. So there was a discussion. You can search for detail. I think the agents are going to be able to say, oh, well, you're in Charleston, South Carolina for this kind of condition, and it knows the weather and everything else. It's going to create an assemblage for you. And someone's going to still look at it like shop drawings and approve it. Yeah. But the process of, we're in the business of turning electricity into drawings right now. Mm-hmm. And what the client wants is, I think, a polite, curated experience with judgment. And that's the value.
Welcome to the TRXL podcast. I'm Evan TRXL, and in this episode, Phil Reed is back for what is apparently becoming an annual thing. We usually do this one in person in Denver, but scheduling one this year, so you get us remote. I'm a little bit sad about it, but my calendar is thrilled. Phil is the CEO and co-founder of Reed Thomas, a BIM and VDC consulting group that works with designers, builders, manufacturers, and owners, and he advises AEC technology startups on getting to market. He was there in the early days of Revit, and he co-authored the Mastering Autodesk Revit architecture books that a lot of us learned from. These days, he spends much of the year on the road sitting with firms in the US and in Australia and watching what they're doing with AI, which turns out to be a very different thing from what gets posted about online. He also runs an event called AEC Acoustics, which happens at a modest camp in North Florida at the end of September. It's capped at 50 people. There's a spring-fed lake, there's a French chef, and there's no alcohol. We spend the last stretch of the conversation on it because the format of the event is deliberate, and I think it's worth understanding why. In this episode, we explore why the sawtooth diagram might have been a positive take on the project process all along. We talk about AI as an intern rather than as an oracle, how delegation is a skill architecture school never taught anyone, why automated documentation is fast but not yet predictable, and what actually happens to the week of work that now takes a morning. Phil reframes a diagram most of us were taught to see as a failure. The sawtooth was always the bad option, the jagged line that you were supposed to smooth out into something continuous. His argument is that those jagged stopping points are exactly where a person with experience steps in and says, wait a minute, are you sure you want to do this? Take them out in the name of a frictionless process, and you take the judgment out with them. That tension runs underneath everything else we get into, including what we teach students, what we choose to automate, and what we give up without noticing we gave it up. As usual, there's an extensive amount of additional information in the show notes, so be sure to check them out. You can find them directly in your podcast app if you're a paid supporter of TRXL Plus. And I would like to thank all of you supporting members right now for your continued support. And if you're a free member, you can find the show notes and more about becoming a supporting member at trxl.co. So without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Phil Reed.
You remember the old sawtooth diagram that it keeps coming up? It's like, oh, this is this thing. You don't want this thing to happen. It's disruptive. What you want is this one thing to happen. It's nice and smooth.
Yeah.
I think the sawtooth is a really good thing now. It's called...
I've always thought it was a good thing. I've always thought it was a good thing.
These little stopping points are where you inject judgment and experience.
Mm.
And so just having some kind of continuous thing, oh yeah, we'll make a decision. We'll flap the butterfly wings over here and the building will get built over here. And actually having those moments where you go, well, wait a minute. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, is important. And I'm seeing a lot with AI now where you have to inject.
Oh, for sure.
Judgment.
Yeah.
You have to stop and do it again with your favorite tool and your favorite consultant and let them go, wait a minute. Are you sure you want to do this? Because we might want to do that.
I think we're officially recording now, Phil. I want to welcome you to the show. because I think
Thank you,
that's
Evan.
a great place to start. Yeah. So
Don't tell Bernstein.
yeah, don't tell Bernstein. He's been trying to get rid of that chart tell everybody that you've been doing it wrong for so long that, and now you're like,
Oh, it was so
wait,
seductive, right? It was just so binary. Oh, the sawtooth, that's so disruptive. We should do this other thing.
that
And maybe the
disruption was
sawtooth
was
has
so
validity.
useful sometimes because
Yeah.
it gave you a chance to say, like, okay, we built this model. There's lots of stuff wrong with it because, I mean, this is just like a particular example when it was like, okay, you did pre-design in SketchUp or Rhino or whatever, right? And then you would not want to get that information into Revit. Why?
You start over.
Because you need to start over because now you have to apply a different level of thinking to the stuff that was like placeholders and generic and I don't care and messy on purpose because that's how architects work. It's kind of messy on
Right.
purpose, right? It's like you're
Yeah,
totally
you're
comfortable with.
rationalizing your decisions. So let's
Yeah.
start over elegantly. Don't try
Right.
to connect the data all the time because you might have to untangle spaghetti to connect the data.
And that hasn't changed with AI, right? It's like
No.
you can use it as a thinking partner, and it can actually prompt you to think differently about how you initially were setting out to go on that adventure, solve that problem, whatever you want to do, and then you're like, oh, okay, now I'm going to take a step back on purpose, and I'm going to say, new approach or different approach. And I think that's very interesting to kind of bring that back to the idea of that diagram, right? Because
Yeah, well, the
that
question
visual.
came up a couple of weeks ago with discussions in Sydney and customers all about how they're using, in this case, how they're using Varus workflow best practices. And someone said, well, how do we get that back into, Reddit? And I said, well, you'd have to model it. You'll have to start over. And the lead designer went, oh, that's fine. I want to do that anyway. I don't want all that chaff. I want the essence of the idea. And then I want to apply, judgment. And I thought, oh, maybe the sawtooth diagram has validity in terms of it's important to stop and apply judgment and not just think that it's always going to be one continuous, nice, neat line.
Well, what I see is I see people wanting it both ways, right? I see this all the time. They're like, I want it to do it for me. And they complain that I have to go in and edit and fix and do all that stuff. And they
Right,
also
untangle
want
it.
total control and they want it to be perfect, right? So it's like, I don't know that people necessarily see that they want it both ways, but the way they present it is they want it both ways. And you're just not going to get it both ways.
It's
Yeah.
I think, and so the process of designing something and making it evident creates the artifact that allows people to object. And
For
then
sure.
it has to change.
Mm.
And so I don't know that we can create an environment where, Chris, you can say, well, I just want to describe it and it does it. And then you look at what you described and what it did and went, no, I don't know. That's not what I meant. And then you have to tweak it and tweak it and tweak it.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we can create a continuous environment that does what we want because it doesn't do what we want. It does what we tell it or ask it. And sometimes it deviates in really important ways. It does things that we didn't ask that become interesting opportunities, or Bob Ross would call a happy accident.
Yeah. Right.
So I don't know that the sawtooth diagram is a bad thing. It was used as that A-B, remember back in the day? Sort of, oh, you don't want this sawtooth, you want this nice smooth curve. But the sawtooth is where we stop and apply judgment and where we start over
Yeah.
elegantly. As long as you can start over elegantly. I like what you said, this where you're starting with a tool that requires more rigorous thinking or more rigorous design.
There was when I was running digital practice, there was a leader in our firm who was very interested in pursuing the kind of push button building maker, right? Like some tool to that would do it all. And I thought that was such an interesting desire in the first part. I'm like, well, but what do we do here? Do we just spit out buildings? Is that what we do? Like of course there was some level of intent to have all of the design logic encoded, and therefore it could do that kind of a thing, and it would be up to some standard. It wouldn't just be, any old building, for example. But it also assumed that that there was, and maybe there are some buildings that just, like more of the commodity buildings that don't need the injection of judgment over and over and over again throughout the design process, right? Like the working out of
Right.
challenges, issues, constraints, all of those things. But it was like, well, but who are we, and who do we want to be, and why do we want to have a push button solution?
Do you want that to be your business?
Do you want that to be your business? Do you want that to be why you exist? Right? I don't know. There was something about it that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I'm like, I hope we don't. I'm not interested in making that tool. I'm not interested in doing that process as an architect. It was very interesting.
At the extreme, if you could describe a building and it would exist tomorrow, I don't know that we get good buildings. I think a lot of the moments that we have at the speed, we're going as fast as we can right now. The buildings the buildings are as complicated as they've ever been historically.
Sure.
And I don't know that we're getting buildings. I don't know that we're getting better design. We're going fast. I think there's something to be said about going slow. And that's probably a topic that's been perking in my brain for 25 years, that the importance of going slow and not trying to do 10 things at once and coming back to it. You've written, right? So you get the ideas out and then you come back and edit later, and then you get the ideas out and you come back and edit. You don't try to edit in the moment because you'll miss the opportunity of getting the big ideas out. And I think with AI, well, the question comes up, okay, so if I make this shape or make this image, how do I get that into Revit? And I'm like, I don't know that that's what you want. You might want to use your judgment and, get your 4 cardinal views or your 5 cardinal views, north, south, east, west, and top, and then model in context. Make it nice and clean and make some rigorous decisions. And it's still going to change again. But just turning prompts into buildings, I think we'll miss a lot of opportunities. And there's no shortage of buildings that took hundreds of years to build and are extraordinary. And maybe because they took 100 years to build. So,
if you look at Thomas Heatherwick's work in his book Humanize, I mean, it's very much about creating architecture, capital A architecture, which has the human experience at the center. And for you to get to the human experience level where you're creating environments for people to experience for various functions and uses, it's not just about enjoyment, right? It's a lot of things. The argument is that isn't happening enough. And to your point, I don't think that we're getting closer to that with the way that architects are working now with the pressures from the outside, right? It's like you said, we're already spending all the time, and buildings actually only get better when you spend more time working on them, not the other way around, right? We work in an environment where we try to limit the amount of time you're allowed to spend on design or whatever, because people value the time that they're spending, and less time is better, but less time is not better for the outcome of the project.
Well, I think the tools now, the purpose of the tools as they've evolved the last 25 years or so were for the purpose of coordinating decisions. But I don't know, we're building buildings faster. And there's something else that happens with buildings around evolved spaces. When a building evolves, and if you've never been to City Museum in St. Louis, we should stop now and you book a flight, go to City Museum, and then you come back. It was a shoe factory that's evolved into this kind of interactive museum space, but not like the ones, not the Discovery Place Museum where kids run around manic and they pound things and then run around manic. City Museum has artifacts of old buildings and old industrial slides and sculpture, and it's a unique and extraordinary place, I think, in the world. And it's evolved. it didn't get designed and then it one day opened,
Yeah.
which is how our buildings tend to
Right.
show up now, right? They get designed, they're built, and one day they're open, and they never really evolve after that. They get torn down and something else gets built. So
Yeah, it's silly.
yeah, yeah, we build them and they last for about 7 years, and we tear them down and build something else for. So I don't know. I think there's something to be said about going back to a little of the sawtooth, where we make decisions and then we revisit them and we go slow and we inject judgment and experience. And we leverage the technology not to do 10 things simultaneously, but to do one thing rigorously.
Yeah, that thoughtful injections of intensity is super important. And it's interesting to see the business pressure of not doing that applied in various ways. And so not just from a technology standpoint, right, but on a staffing level and a training level and all of these things, like there seems to be these things seem to be at odds. It's like you have to actually define, I think, step back and define what the business is there for and what it is to do and how what each role does to serve that purpose, and then design all of the tooling, all of the training, all of the things around that, and that it's going to evolve over time, but always going back to what is that guiding star, right? Like, what are the guiding principles? You have to keep coming back to the partie diagram of the project, but for the business or for the unit, to always make sure you're still going in that direction. And it's easy to lose sight of that. I mean, there's obviously lots and lots of motivations, and there's lots and lots of, like, people have different incentives, right? And they start to focus only on fulfilling those incentives. So if as a project manager, if my incentive is profitability on this project,
Sure.
right, that starts to pull away from why does the business exist? I mean, it could, right? I'm
Right.
not saying
Right,
that it
right,
should.
right.
But those competing interests then, even inside a firm, can be tearing things apart instead of all going in the same direction.
Look, I think we've got to have large firms that have IP, and we know if we're going to build $1 billion building that the big firm is going to be around in 5 years, 7 years to finish it. But I know small firms and small practitioners killing it, and they're going slow, and they're going on site, and they're not trying to figure everything out in the drawings. They're figuring out the details, and they're also taking advantage of opportunities in the moment, and they're very comfortable
Like, that sounds
using the
thoughtful.
technology they use. And they're like, yeah, don't tell anybody. We're killing it. And they're doing good work. And it would have taken a team of half a dozen people to do the work that they're doing. So I'm interested to see where the large firm is going to go. And particularly, and I'll say this word, don't roll your eyes, AI, blah, 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 AI. I jokingly call it the architectural intern, but hear me out. The senior designer with the judgment and the experience and the poetry to describe something, standing over the shoulder of the carbon-based intern and go, okay, but move it over here. Okay, but what if we do that? Okay, what about this? So the slow part of that process, and I don't mean slow in a pejorative way, but just after you've discussed and talked about, so there's an execution that occurs that takes hours or days. I don't think AI is going to replace that process, but I see where it could augment it for a small practitioner or an office where they're having the discussion with whatever agent they prefer. And then if that agent knows how to create all the button and mouse and clicks to execute those tasks in whatever design tool you want. It doesn't have to be Revit. As long as it knows how to use the application, I think we're in for a profound change of workflow, because that agent can execute tasks, whether it's building a component or placing a wall or adjusting a building. But to have a discussion and even talk about the implications of that design decision. You know, if you're going to change the level to a bunch of floors in a multi-story building, okay, but what does that mean? And what that means in terms of procurement, in terms of staging, in terms of having to resubmit possibly, and then going, okay, let's do it. And at that point, it's doing the thing that the carbon-based interns would do, but it's the agent doing it. And it's still up to the judgment of the designer, but I think we're very close to being able to have discussions and understand implications and not have to drive the application itself, right? Whatever the end application is.
This episode of the TRXL podcast is supported by Avail, and I wanted to share a piece of a conversation I recently had with one of Avail's customers. Check it out. What was the moment or the project that finally made your firm say, we actually need to manage this stuff? Do you remember?
I was there. We actually came from another platform. And so it was a platform that we felt like wasn't sort of really invested in the customer and wasn't really sort of understanding the customer's problems. They sort of had a much harder to navigate user interface. It made it harder to sort of upload and harvest these projects in the method that we wanted. And so we looked at a bunch of different products when we were abandoning that previous platform. We met Randall and his team, and we felt that these guys understand us. And so we went with their platform a number of years ago, and the community and the support that they've provided has kept us, lockstep with their advancements and development. And we just got a preview, I think, last month on some of the stuff that they're going to release this year, and couldn't be more excited. It's always something that I knew I wanted but couldn't quite articulate, and Randall always is able to do that for us. So this next roadmap is super exciting.
My thanks to Avail for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. Now let's get back to the conversation. It's been through that process that the person became the person with experience. And so now I'm wondering what happens to the ones who don't get that experience.
No, I think they will. But it's weird.
How so? If it's an agent, if it's your example.
I like Grok. Have a conversation with Grok about how to build a component in Revit. And it is profoundly accurate, but it can't move your mouse. I had to ask it to go slow. I went down a rabbit hole. Like, well, could you tell me how to build it? And in extraordinary detail and accurately went through the process of how to build a parametric component, but it couldn't click the buttons for me, and it couldn't show me an interface side by, like, where would I actually click that? Where do I find it? It was like, oh, go to this view, click this option, draw a reference plane. I'm like, no, I want it to show me. But from a training and implementation standpoint, it was highly accurate. Between the void and the solid tool, I had to get it to clarify. But other than that, I thought this is a fantastic on-demand training environment, except it's not showing me screenshots. I think we'll still want to have discussions with people with judgment, but in the moment, when you're trying to figure something out, I think it's going to inform you of, like right now, it only does what you ask it. But I think you could say, hey, I want you to do this thing. Do you have any concerns? And it doesn't mean I'm working by myself as an architect in the future. I might work in a room full of other architects and say, hey, look at what we're doing. What do you think about this? But I don't know that it has to be a large business anymore. The hard part for us is we're not used to having staff. Like if you're a small practitioner, you're doing it all yourself. But in a large firm, you're used to delegating tasks. So I think one of the things one of the artifacts of this will be in studios, we start to teach students how to delegate early in the design process because they'll be able to. And right now, you're saying like senior people learn how to delegate over time. But delegation is really important when you're asking an agent to do things or to render things or to optioneer things. You don't want to wait 20 years to learn how to delegate or learn how to ask good questions.
There's probably students right now who are doing that already, and they're
I
kind
hope
of
so.
hiding.
I hope
They're hiding it. But like they
No,
just don't feel
I hope they're
free.
being shown. If students are using AI, I hope they're being
If.
held accountable to their design and going, okay, you've designed
Right.
that amazing thing quickly. Now be accountable for it. Now actually make the pieces and parts, create the instructions that would lead to constructability. So be accountable. Don't just make an image and that's where you stop.
Yeah. You said something earlier when you were describing that small team that said, and you said they said, don't tell anybody. Like they're being incredibly successful. Where's that come from? Like, what is that about? Don't
We were
tell
joking
anybody.
because he was opening up he was doing something on his computer. And I'm like, that's an expensive box you have on your desk, because I could see it on the side. He goes, oh yeah. And his specialist workflow in the sort of commercial institutional space. And when he told me what he's making a year, I laughed. He goes, yeah, don't tell anybody, I'm killing it. He was putting out the work of a small team by himself.
Why don't
with the
tell
best
anybody, though?
hardware. The smaller firms have the best hardware. They're not waiting on 5-year upgrade cycles, right?
Right.
They can. And the kind of work that he was doing didn't require a large company with, 100, 1,000 people.
So is this coming more from like because he is competing with bigger firms and he's a small firm? Like don't let the
Don't tell
public
anybody what I'm
know that my small team is capable of what appears to look like
Right.
a large team is handling. Okay. Interesting.
Well, and if you think about a large organization, probably a third of that company doesn't do billable tasks. They're probably managing people that do billable tasks. And so you got to absorb that overhead in a
Yeah.
larger company.
Right.
And small companies, they don't have they don't have a third of the company do non-billable tasks.
So was that possible through, I mean, tell me about that. We're getting like inside baseball here, but like, is it because of their use of AI and agents and they had done the work to like institutionalize those kinds of processes into their day-to-day work? Or was it?
This was
I mean,
a
is this-
5-year-old discussion with a person who was using Revit to design a certain commercial environment that
Mm-hmm.
was and they were using Enscape to render it
Mm-hmm.
concurrently to the design. And then they were able to send the owner images so they can make decisions. I think it's not renderings. We're not giving them an artifact so they accept it. We're giving them
No.
images so that they can, in some
Make
cases,
decisions.
object to it or understand it, and then work can proceed.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're using what I'm seeing companies do with AI. Even though there's a lot of noise around making shapes and having the external artifact of prompting building shapes. I'm not seeing that as much as maybe at the pursuit stage. What I'm seeing a lot of is very bespoke, curated design with materiality, and then using AI to very carefully and rigorously study finishes and materials.
Interesting.
And that part of it is really time consuming. So if you have a first pass and you've established where things are and what they are and some materiality, the optioneering of that light fixture or furniture or material doesn't require having a component built at a high level of fidelity or having a material that's a seamless texture. You can reference it, put it in the image, and in 30 seconds have another version of that. And I don't think we want to overwhelm clients with 100 ideas. We still want to curate and help them understand why we think certain design decisions are better than others.
Mm-hmm.
But the time to do that optioneering is a week's effort, a week of effort, where now I'm seeing it happen in a morning. And the other thing that I'm seeing is the first design, it's not even AI for rendering. It's more like AI for sketching and sort of for ideating.
Yeah.
So in photographs, this was a project in Sydney last week. There is a rail station and right? It's like what do they call a heritage project? You can't just go make things the way you want it. You have to be very respectful of these older buildings. So in context with the heritage project, they were injecting their piece as a description to ideate and only using that to discuss internally, but it gave visual feedback of the design intent, and then they would go and build what they want, what they intended to build. Because it's not smart enough to do all the right pieces and parts and put it all in the right location, but it's a very fast way to be able to respond to an idea.
Yeah.
I'm seeing that. And that effort would have taken, I don't even know how the specialists would do it in a week. Or they're taking images from, in this case, from Enscape. Yeah. And, you just can't get everything right. The lighting, the time of day, other emotional effects to the in the design. And so instead of trying to manually or transactionally control each of these pieces, they're getting what's good enough. They're taking the photo from the right location. That's the hard part. So they get the photo from the right location, and then they prompt a different time of day, a different weather effect, people or not people. And the emotion that comes out of those images seems to be orders of magnitude greater than the traditional rendering, because the traditional rendering we got out of Enscape, and I'm not disparaging Enscape at all, but Enscape only renders what's in the design file. And V-Ray only renders what's in the design file. But what you render with AI is beyond what's in the design file. It's kind of speculative. And I think that's why it's really interesting, is because you can render ahead of the design, like we used to do, Evan. We used to sketch, and then the design would get on a vector from sketching or from modeling, and then we would commit those decisions to a sort of more formal design process. Mm-hmm. And we got away from that with 3D modeling, because we would build the model in the computer and then we would render the results. And so we sort of inverted the process. And now I think we're going back. We're sketching again in order to design.
Yeah.
But the sketch is just a prompted image.
So what happens when the thing that used to take a week happens in a morning, right? What happens to, what do you do with that time? Do you get it back for yourself? Does it go somewhere else to the business? I think one of the dangers is that it goes toward backlog. I think that's actually a danger, potentially. But also...
You could pursue projects that would cost you a lot of money to pursue as a marketing effort. You could do speculative work with an owner. You could do pursuit work, speculative pursuit work. And if it doesn't work out, you haven't spent 2 weeks of sunk cost with 3 people doing manual tasks. It was part of a conversation. Someone said, I used to feel, so the downside point, I used to feel like I had to do 10 things in a day, and now I feel like I have to do 100. Exactly. I think I'm starting to hate my job.
Yeah.
I don't think the client wants 1,000 options.
No, I think, well, the other thing you don't want maybe is to manage the overhead of 10 more projects either. I mean, there definitely is the opportunity to have more projects that you personally have a lighter touch on, and therefore there's just more throughput. But that doesn't necessarily put you in the right place as a human to work on that business. Right.
Well, at the extreme, everything is manufacturing. We just manufacture drawings, and the drawings get manufactured into buildings. And so I don't know that we can predictably manufacture drawings any faster. Technology is aspiring to do that now with tools like Glyph, which is a sort of push a button and your document set gets set up and your views go on sheets, and the views get details and text and tags and dimensions. But at the moment, it's very fast, but the results aren't predictable. So I don't think it's really usable in its present form.
But it's coming, right? Like the idea of auto drawings.
I think so. Like
it's happening in mechanical CAD already, right? It's going to happen to architecture.
If as long as the efficiency is predictable, because in the present, and it's not just Glyph, there's some other tools that do it as well. It creates all your sheet set, views on sheets, text tags, dimensions, and the views, and then you have to go through and make sure that it's done right.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's interesting. And so I think if we just have, the thing about these kinds of tools is it's done, but it's not finished. You have to go and check it. But if you have 2,000 patient rooms in a hospital, which is a real case right now, 2,000 patient rooms, every room has to have ceiling plan planned, 4 elevations, 2 orthographic views, a room data sheet, and nobody wants to set up 2,000 views manually.
Yeah.
So the company is using Glyph to set up 2,000 sheets, and then the users go in and move the dimensions, clean, make sure things can read properly. And they're like, yeah, it's not interesting, but it's better than having to do everything. And I think if it's going to scale, it needs to scale down to the solo practitioner who can predictably document projects. But then I'm thinking, if it can automatically do that, why do you have to push a button to do it? Why does it just happen? One of the artifacts, I'm rambling. One of the artifacts about documentation is the reason we start so soon is because it takes so long.
There's so much to do.
Right. But if you could do it predictably and efficiently, you wouldn't push the button until the very end.
Well, here's an interesting future potential, though, is that instead of creating drawings for people to read, you're creating drawings for another machine to read, right? We're seeing this in many other ways now. It's like resumes, for example, right? People are using AI to generate the resume for another AI to read the resume. And it's interesting, right? Because you're still generating a resume you're hoping to look good to a person, but a person's not even going to look at it for like gates number 1, 2, and 3 before it actually gets to human eyeballs. But drawings are going to be like that too. It's like you're going to have your AI create the drawings so that an AI can read the drawings, and so that it can actually just send the instructions to a machine so that the machine can cut the parts to make the thing, right? And I think that's kind of an interesting potential future.
Yeah, I still think we need rational instructions. Like we need clarity of plan section and elevation.
Well, the purpose of drawings previously was intent, right? And intent didn't explicitly lay everything out. It wasn't explicit.
Look at old drawings. You're like, it's kind of primitive. If you could stop there.
Remember, you would just erase the number of the dimension and change the number, right? You wouldn't actually move the wall, for example.
Drawing.
Right.
No, that's crazy talk.
Right.
No, I think the artifact of documentation is still there, and we haven't sorted out how to predictably. We've sorted out the efficiency, like push a button and you get 1,000 room data sheets and 1,000 room, 1,000 sheets in a minute. But it's not. It's highly efficient, but it's not predictable yet. You have to go through each view and make sure things are correct. And if you correct something, it doesn't then go, oh, should I keep doing this other places? Like with an intern, if you had an intern document a sheet full of details, you go, okay, here's the first one. Here's what I want you to do. When you've done half of it, come get me. And then you review it and go, okay, that's pretty good. Do a couple of more, come get me. Okay, complete the sheet, come get me. But these automation tools don't do that. It just does everything. It vomits it all out, and then you have to go and manually, look through the wet spaghetti and make sure things are in the right place and tags aren't top of each other and dimensions make sense because they're not in the middle of
all 1,000 examples. Yeah.
Right. And you're like, oh, this isn't fun anymore.
Yeah. But on the other hand,
I don't know that the documentation part of it has been sorted out, but the AI part of ideating on top of a curated design to see subtle changes of materials, finishes, fixtures, furnishings. Like I love that I don't have to build a complicated light fixture in Revit. I can take an image or a screenshot of one, drag it in as a reference image and say, swap these pendant lamps with this other pendant. And it's like so profoundly believable. Even the lighting artifacts, the specular lighting artifacts, refractions, and I didn't have to model it. I just wanted to create the idea.
Yeah. Yeah, but then how do you, there's some amount of cognitive load that comes along with now those two things are not equals, right? The thing in the rendering is not what's in the drawing. And now I have to somehow remember to somehow get that in there, right? And because you can move at the speed of thought in the prompting rendering tool, you then have to have that due diligence of going back and making sure all of those decisions.
You have to go back and build it at some point.
And get them in there, yeah, right.
But the alternative is have to build
it's the
all
other
the
way around
materials,
of
all
what it
the
used to be.
textures, all of the geometry in order to show a variant.
Right, you don't have to do
and
that.
Now I can create one variant as the intent, and then look for opportunities of material and lighting and texture. And then you could do that half a dozen times and then decide, okay, which one do you want? And then you build it and swap it out. But I don't think you want to show your client 1,000 options and go, oh, pick one. Or I was talking to someone recently. They said, if you ever go to a restaurant and it's got a really big menu, you know nothing's going to be good. Where do you get? If you go to restaurants like 1 8.5 by 11, this is today's menu.
It's what we
like,
do.
Ooh, fancy.
We don't try to please everybody, right?
There'd be a poultry and a fish and a red beet,
and that's it.
And a couple of options,
option.
but not 10 menus. Like a Denny's or something.
Let's take a short break from the conversation to invite you to join the most influential technology leaders in the AEC industry at Confluence. Composed of in-person events and a podcast co-hosted by yours truly, Confluence is designed to foster conversations between AEC firms and technology companies so they can learn, share, and engage with each other to support industry innovation. Software company Avail, which creates content management solutions for the AEC industry, started hosting Confluence events in 2019 to understand what firms are needing, wanting, and thinking around technology. To learn more about Confluence, explore upcoming events, and listen to podcast episodes, go to confluence.getavail.com. My thanks to Confluence for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. And now, let's get back to the conversation. Yeah. Well, what you're describing, it to me gets you back to what the value of architecture actually is. The value of creating the environment, the space for people, and spending the time tweaking that rather than the documentation process. There's been some point at which generally architects became drawing manufacturers, to your point earlier, right? And that is actually not
drawings.
That is the side effect of the main pursuit. That is how you achieve the main pursuit, but it's not the main pursuit, right? You're not in business to draw drawings. There might be some people who work in your firm whose job is to do that for sure.
We definitely couldn't do what they did at for Brunelleschi's dome. They set out the dimensions of that church, and they were like, we can't build this right now. The dome is going to be larger than any dome that's ever been built. And the church father said, oh, that's okay. When it comes time to build the dome, God will show us how. Like, you can't do that now in architecture. You'll get sued. So we have an enormous, we have the weight of defining everything up front because it's a legal requirement of instructions. But what you're talking about is where we designed enough that said, what is it? Where is it? How is it assembled? But then people with experience and judgment said, I know you've got the detail to do it like this, but I think you might want to do this other thing. So there was a discussion. You can search for detail. I think the agents are going to be able to say, oh, well, you're in Charleston, South Carolina for this kind of condition, and it knows the weather and everything else. It's going to create an assemblage for you. And someone's going to still look at it like shop drawings and approve it. Yeah. But the process of, we're in the business of turning electricity into drawings right now. Mm-hmm. And what the client wants is, I think, a polite, curated experience with judgment. And that's the value.
Yeah.
Whether you're a composer of music or a composer of film or a composer of a built environment, you're trying to create an emotion and a feedback, a moment, and the client needs that expertise because they're not good at it. Do you hear the objections with AI about, oh, but now your client will be able to prompt an image and they won't need the architect? Like, really? Is a client really going to take the blame when something turns to shit? They're like, no, you should hire someone with judgment and experience.
And the ability to take the risk, right? I mean, that's ultimately
Well,
the
there's so many
architect and the
options.
builder's job.
I don't think lawyers are going away because of AI. It's just case precedents, and then the lawyer is going to look at all the different angles and rhetoric to present their case to the benefit of their client. And the architect's going to have all these options, and then they're going to have to use their judgment and explain to the client why this direction is the best practice, why you should do this. And so there's still going to be that relationship.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to displace it. What I don't think we're used to right now is the interns having interns. Right? The interns did the work, but now the technology with AI allows the interns to have interns. The intern can delegate a request or a task or a prompt where it would have been a transactional days or weeks effort in post-production to create a particular vector, and now the intern can request the digital intern to do it and then look at the options. That's what I'm seeing a lot of it. And right now, education, I don't think it's, we don't expect students to delegate tasks, so we don't teach them to, but we're going to have to teach them best practices to delegate tasks.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point because you're right. Like, school is about doing the reps yourself, right? Doing everything, because that's what architecture school is.
I don't think that's going away. It's teaching us to make a decision and be accountable for it. Well, how do you get to the point of making the decision? Sometimes you don't see that the design is underwhelming until you've gone down the path of trying to make the design. So we still have to teach that. But if you had if a first year architecture student had 1,000 students working for them, that's a different learning experience.
Yeah. Well, the thing that it makes me think of too is that because an architecture studio, like a real business, is all of the levers are somehow attached to each other in the machine of the business. So you don't have the luxury of just pursuing, if you're a small firm, pure design, right? There's business levers attached to design decisions, for example.
Oh, yeah. You can't just make shapes. You have to make decisions, right?
But when it comes to students and the way that those things can actually be leveraged with each other, like the constraints, you pull this lever, the other one has to give a little bit. For that potential to come into the architectural education process, I just think there's more potential for that to actually happen now, because at many schools, it is a pure design pursuit. It is not learning how to be an entrepreneur, learning how to run a business, learning how to talk to clients, learning how to facilitate the design process with a client and a contractor and an AHJ and all of those things that are literally constrained to each other, right? And the money and the time and all of those things. And now I think they're actually, I could see that happening, right? It's like, okay, you're doing this. I can see you. The agent is looking over your shoulder and saying, I can see you're doing this. Here's what else that means in all of those other things that you have traditionally not had to pay attention to.
That is something that is very hard, is understanding the implications of a decision until you've made design decisions, until you've taken time to build a model, to illuminate it, to inhabit it. We have real-time environments, right? So now you can inhabit the space that you're designing in real time. Mm-hmm. But understanding the implications of a design decision
in real time, potentially.
You could get overwhelmed with stuff. But using one of the things about Revit's great because you can design stuff and it quantifies it as a byproduct of your design. But I'm finding with AI, you can get a vector in terms of project cost, demolition, time to completion, design time, demo time, time to submit your drawings and get approvals. You can ask requests based on a photograph of an intended design, and it'll give you a spreadsheet within a vector of accuracy. How much is it going to cost to complete this project? Including, you're putting a slate pool table in the middle of that living room. You might want to engage an engineer to go under the house and make sure there's structure sufficient to support the pool table.
It sounds like you've done this, Phil. I want
It's really cool.
So you've done this. You've take a picture of a thing, and you're just basically running a thought experiment. Lay this out for me.
And here's the end. And I want to build this project at this location, and the purpose of it is the client, in this case, is an empty nester, and so they want to turn what was formerly a den into more of an entertainment space. I need a full breakdown based on this zip code of the project. And it went into, you're going to have to submit drawings. You might want to engage an engineer to make sure there's enough structure to, sufficient for the pool table.
Things that you're likely not thinking about.
And and I'm like, okay, could you, in spreadsheet form, and with a range for pricing. And you haven't built a Revit model to start with.
Yeah, right.
Right. So you get some kind of vector just to sort of test the water with a client. You really like this because we're talking about, $150,000 to $200,000. Or you could spend a couple of weeks in a sunk cost of, making things that get counted by Revit. The other, or another example would be to take there's a artifact for interiors of pursuing work at risk with an owner. And if the owner, that project goes forward, you get the work. But in the meantime, they want to see earnest design work for the owner to show their client, right, who's going to lease that space. So what happens is they go out on site and they measure, and then they go back and build a Revit model, and then they fill it, make sure there's enough cubicles that fit, right? All the interior stuff for a commercial office space. Turns out you can use AI, take photographs, remove everything that's not fixed, so all your wall hangings, all your furnishings, remove them from the image and then sketch on top of it, or prompt different use cases. And then let's say it takes a week or 2 or 3 people a week as a sunk cost, and then the client says, yeah, that project's not going to go forward in that space, but we found another space. Can you go do the same thing over here? It's like, every time 3 people have to work at risk for a week or 2 weeks, as opposed to prompting the idea, getting some vector with a client and then their client who wants to lease a space as a tenant outfit. I think you're able to ideate much faster at less cost, which is one of the things that I think the AI will lend itself to.
Yeah, I think one of the
real estate efforts, like commercial tenant outfits, where you ideate with AI.
But high value, right? Because if the job is not going to go forward, you want to know immediately. You don't want to know in a week or 2, right?
Right. But if you spend a week or 2 making, measuring, building your as-built model, placing furniture, creating 2 or 3 options, printing it out, and then it doesn't go forward.
Yeah.
I don't know. Entry-level intern bills out $100 an hour. And they work 40 hours. And there's 3 of those, and they work for 2 weeks, $25,000.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the thesis behind what Clifton's doing over at TestFit, right? Which is it's about feasibility, because the number of deals that are possible is small compared to the number of possibilities, right? And it's really about finding the needle in the haystack.
The feasibility
as
study.
Fast as possible, right? Because there is so much time burned there. And you're talking about another version of that where you're not...
I know, it's a feasibility study that is a 3-dimensional image. It's not even a floor plan. It's just like, hey, do you like these materials? Do you like this lighting? Does it work? I mean, it could be plans. It's just a silicon-based architectural intern.
Yeah.
It still does silly things if you ask it to create floor plans. You know, you can't open LinkedIn without seeing an AR article, and the couches face the wrong way. There's 20-foot corridors to the end of the bathroom, and
you got to go through the bathroom
sense
to get to the
But this
front
is this.
door.
But
Yeah.
this is the present version of this is the shitty, six-fingered person eating spaghetti. That was a year ago, and where
Right,
we've
and
come in
now
a
it's
year, I don't
way
think
gone.
it's going to be 20-foot corridors with bathrooms and couches and TVs turned around facing the wrong way. It's going to get better.
For sure.
So that
What do you think of-
optioneering,
Well, what do you think about okay, because I think there's a lot of architects out there who are waiting for the better, and they're not working with the now. And they think once it's better, I wouldn't have had to waste all my time to get there.
I still will use AI to create an image as a vector, and then I'll just place it. It's just an underlay, and I place my piece of trace on top of it, and then I do what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So let it make.
But so
if you
why?
had an architectural intern and you're like, oh, that's not really going to work. I see I asked you to do that, but you really did this. You didn't do what I wanted. You did what I asked. Okay, well, give me
Yes,
what you
yes.
did, and then let me. It's what you were saying. You wouldn't take the thing and just automatically turn it into the next thing. You'd inject your judgment. You wouldn't pick the lines in SketchUp to build your walls in Revit. You pick them to create Revit walls. You would trace over them, and you would use your judgment to place things.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can use it for things that are useful now in terms of curating the design and then iterating the materials and finishes is profoundly predictable right now. And it's only in the last 4 months. I know with Veris, they implemented Nano Banana around March. And that's where the use, you could do interesting things, but they weren't predictable. Now it's predictable.
Yeah. And through the engagement with these tools, you're building kind of a knowing of how to achieve the things that you're doing.
Yeah. There is a whole thing about prompt engineering and how do I prompt. I just say, just talk to it like you talk to an intern. I need you to do this thing, and here's why, and here's when we need it by. And so I tend not to type prompts because it's too transactional. I tend to open up the microphone and just talk in, full sentences. And that seems to be pretty successful. And what I'm better at a human than creating a long list of commands.
Yeah.
Maybe you could use AI to make a better prompt and say, I need to make a prompt to do this thing, but I don't know if I'm thinking about everything that needs to be thought of to create the prompt. And ask it, back and forth dialogue, and then go, okay, distill this into a useful request.
Yeah.
Haven't tried that yet.
I find that run of what is it? What would you call that? It's just like
Stream of consciousness.
Stream of consciousness, blabbering even. It's like, oh, I didn't mean that part. So all of that it's fine. It actually
seems
does
to be
incredibly well with that.
Understanding what you're,
Right. Yeah.
Carrie Thompson said, don't, as Carrie Thompson, he said the prompt is poetry.
So
You should
what does that mean?
describe it in a way that's poetic.
Interesting.
And-
Does he speak in poetry?
No, but he was, and then he opined that we should teach poetry in architecture school as a result, because the poetry of the description, it's not just the words. There's something, right? The sum is greater than the parts, and so it's not engineering. It's not prompt engineering. It's something more elegant and maybe a little more essential. But around the visual space, I see it extremely useful. What I'm seeing in the pursuit phase, they're using AI for kind of ideating the overall building form. But really, it's not just turning into buildings from pictures. That's too brutal. What I am seeing is this very bespoke, curated design process, and then in context with that, exploring materials, exploring finishes, in a way that, or even swapping out assets that would take, it's not interesting days and hours of work to get all of your Revit families, all of your seamless textures, all of your finishes, all of your fixtures.
Yeah.
That part's not fun, Evan.
Nope.
It's not.
No one signed up
But
to
if
do
you-
that. No.
if you get where it is and what it is, and then you swap out, like you could take a bad photograph of a texture and it will turn it into the seamless texture inside of the AI rendered image. And then from that, you can extract a seamless texture and put it in your project.
Mm. In your Revit environment, right?
Or
that
whatever.
It's part of the documentation at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, and so that part seems to be, we're not, and don't get me wrong, every time there's a technical intervention, we give something up. And then the next generation, and then at some point we romanticize what we gave up.
Yeah, totally.
Right. But establishing the first iteration of the design takes so much judgment, but then being able to explore on top of that it's not, it doesn't feel like cheating. It feels like this sort of elegant request. I was testing out a checkout area in a very nice retail space. And the front of the checkout area was marble. And I just said, I like this. I mean, I'm literally telling the AI, I like the marble at the front of this checkout counter. But I'd like to see an option with sort of a cream colored marble that's somewhat translucent and backlit. And what are the iterations I got? Like the lighting artifact of how the illumination passed through this translucent stone and spilled out into the surrounding area. And it's like, oh, that's beautiful. And I don't think I could use Revit to build the kind of accurate lighting that you get from light passing through translucent materials.
Right.
So I could imagine it and I can describe it. I don't know that I could model it. And if I did model it, I'm probably got a sunk cost of a day.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey everyone, I want to take 30 seconds to talk about something that really matters to me. This podcast exists because I believe this industry deserves better conversations. No agenda, no corporate backing, just honest, in-depth dialogue with the people actually shaping where AEC is headed. More than 25,000 of you listen to this show, and less than 50 of you are direct supporters of what I'm doing. And I'm not saying that to make you feel guilty. I'm saying it because if this kind of independent media matters to you, if these conversations have ever changed how you think or introduced you to someone worth knowing, then the most direct way to keep it going is to become a TRXL Plus member. $12 a month, ad-free episodes, the full Leadership Edge newsletter with my deep dives and the things I don't say on the podcast, and the knowledge that you're one of the people making this possible. Head over to the website at trxl.co and click the join button. And either way, I'm really glad that you're here. Now let's get back to today's conversation. The kind of expert button pusher you would need to be in V-Ray to achieve that previously alone would have been
the whole, yeah, if you said,
investment.
you can only get that far in Revit. Okay, let's get the V-Ray. And the V-Ray person at that point doesn't, they don't enjoy their job, I don't think, at that point. They're being asked to do not trivial tasks, but things that are going to be thrown away. They're going to want 2 or 3 options or more. And they go, yeah, let's not do that. Whereas now you can ask for those kind of visual images, emotional images, and they go, yeah, let's not do that. And you've done it. You failed quickly. Let's fail fast.
Fail in a fraction elegantly. Of the time.
Yeah. So in that sense, I think we're going back to first practices, which is let's sketch in order to design. But the sketching now is a poetic prompt. And it may still be a sketch on top of that.
It might
but it's a way of not, instead of modeling in 3D, lighting, materials, geometry, render, and the client goes, yeah, I don't know. We're able to sketch and then show these ideas and ideate and go, okay, well, let's pursue pieces of these in this direction. And you're not failing fast. I don't know what you're validating. You're kind of, until you see it, sometimes you don't know if it's going to work. I'm having design ideas and is so convinced that it was going to look great, and you start modeling it, and you go, it's not so good.
Yeah, totally. 100%.
Right. So I want to find ways to fail elegantly. And I think that's one area where AI is really good at failing elegantly.
Because that's still information, right? Like that is information to move forward with. You decide not to do that is just as good as deciding to do something else, right? It's like there's been many times where you think you have a solution and then you still have time. And what are you going to do at that time? I mean, you could choose to do nothing. You could take off. You could take off and go to the beach, right? But you could also say, okay, now I'm going to try to break that. I'm going to see how many ways I can break that idea to see if it actually passes the test.
It is a little seductive when you see the first couple of images that look so good and you're like, oh, I can stop now. Oh. You don't have to come back to it and be a little underwhelmed. Because it does tend to, I remember the thing with Enscape is I have Revit open, and of course navigating in Revit is kind of tricky in first person. But when you could see the lighting and the reflections and the materials and how the light bounced off it, I had this sense of satisfaction that it did more than I expected. I'm getting that now with AI, where it's doing things that I didn't expect, and it's exceeding my expectations, and I like that. But I think it's good to get beyond that initial sort of honeymoon stage of, God, really nice looking rendering, and actually get into it and go, it's not so overwhelming.
Yeah.
It's a little underwhelming. I better come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you can be accountable from that image to see it through, you like a beautiful backlit translucent marble, how are you going to connect it? How are you going to detail it? How are you going to,
right.
You got to, and if you can be accountable all the way through, I think you're golden. I don't think AI is going to replace anyone that has accountability and judgment. Because the lawyers are still going to look at 10 ideas and decide which way to pursue it. It's not going to replace aesthetic judgment.
Yeah, quality, right? Well, I'm going to switch the conversation up here now and speak to the audience and say, if you find usefulness in conversations like these, I mean, maybe
that's a nice lead-in.
I'm finding like this to me is how you work things out, right? Like this is how you work out, like what's actually going on, where am I going, who am I doing it with, who could help me along the way. I feel like those are the kinds of conversations. I mean, Phil, you say it, the conversations after the presentation is where the meat is when you go to a conference. That's when like, oh, that's why I was here. I was here because of that serendipitous meeting with somebody else who was in the presentation with me, and we had, what do you think about that? And that's where,
even as you and I are chatting, I'm taking notes and like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. You're like my carbon-based AI, Evan. I can have a chat with you, and I come up with an idea that I wouldn't have previously thought I needed to have. Okay, I need to pursue that idea. I need to go think about that a bit. And that's what we're trying to do.
So the segue here is that once a year now, it used to be twice a year. I don't know. It might be twice a year again in the future. We'll see. But Phil has a conference called AEC Acoustics that he runs in Florida. And in September, the end of September is going to be the next
September. One. Yeah, so September through the last Sunday of September through the first Friday of October. Evan, you've been there. And what Adam and I aspired to do was create an environment where we could have, quieter conversation, thoughtful conversations, good food, good discussions. And we didn't feel like we could do that at a big box hotel. So we go to a camp in North Florida where we've got a beautiful spring-fed lake that's about 80 degrees. And what has sort of evolved or organically evolved over the last 5 or 6 years was we had a leadership event in the fall and a technical event in the spring. And the technical event in the spring made sense because that's when the release of software tends to come out. But what was organically occurring was we were having leadership discussions at the technology event, right? They just spill over. And we were having technical discussions at the leadership event. And maybe it's just time to combine that. So we still have Randy Ben, right? So he's a psychologist with a degree in law and a degree in leadership from Georgetown as the leadership facilitator. But we also have technical sessions and discussions, and we're gonna combine them. And I think the intent this year would be leadership discussions at the beginning and end of day, so they're the bookend to the technical discussions. And that'll be the 3 days of the technical leadership. And we still start by coming in on a Sunday. We have an offsite event. We'll go to Itchitucknee Springs, which is a beautiful state park, and go for a spring-fed paddle down a river or paddle down a spring-fed river, and kind of disconnect a little bit from the cell phone that doesn't work because you're in North Florida. You take photos with it and just kind of connect with each other and catch up. And then get in that right mind space. That's the Monday. And then on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, technical leadership sessions. And then on Friday, breakfast and go home. Chef Charles is coming back. He is a joyful, wonderful human that loves to surprise us. So we don't, it's sort of a function of design, but we have, because there's a lake with paddle boards and e-foils and ski boats and kayaks, it just doesn't make sense to have alcohol. So we don't have alcohol, but we do have a French chef. And because we're not at a big box hotel, we can afford to keep pricing, I think, very reasonable. $1,000 all included, $9.99, right?
Yeah.
And the intent of that is, and also people bring their partners. They brought their families. And we have, for younger ones, we could do counselor-led activities, but we've had older teenage come along as well. And they take part, they come down the river with us. They might sit in on a session if they're interested. They certainly join in at mealtime. And meals are even served. We don't have a bunch of tables all separated. We try to keep things in a very familial environment. So it's one big table, and Charles comes out with his, a tray of food, and they lay out, everything's plated family style. So people are passing things, and we have good conversations. And the event is also, it's not meant to be slower, but we do have, the way we sort of organized it is to have the sessions in the morning, and then there's one after lunch, and then there's about from 2:30, 3-hour break, because people do need to catch up on their emails sometimes, and we have to be sensitive to that. But it also gives a bit of respite in the day to go down to the lake or go for a walk if you need to journal or if you need to just decompress.
Yeah.
Get some vitamin D and not feel worn out at the end of a week when you go back home, but actually feel like energized. And so from a leadership, where we used to do the leadership event as a separate event from the technology event, there's just so much overlap. It seems to make sense to do this. And we can't, to keep it uncomplicated, if you start having, 500 people, then you have to have multiple tracks and multiple offsite buses. And then you have to have lanyards because people can't remember all the names. There's 500 people. We don't aspire to have more than 50 people at an event. So people can learn it, you can learn the names of 50 people. A lot of them you'll probably know if you've been to other large events. So no more than 50 people. We have run of the facility. We have motel-style rooms, cabins. The families typically use cabins. And it's a quiet week, but very thoughtful conversations. And I remember Harlan Brum, who's the product manager for Revit. It's a rustic environment, right? It's authentic, but he's standing on the Lakeview Lodge deck, sort of rocking on his heels. And he said, "Yeah, we need more of this." I said, "What do you need? What do you mean, need more of this?" He goes, "We need more of this." He's rocking on his heels again. And he'll be back this year. And that's the kind of environment we want to create, where the sum is greater than the parts, and you go away with a discussion or an idea that you didn't think you were going to have. That's really like one idea that's important to your business can easily pay for the, for the whole week.
Right.
You've been there.
I've been there.
I've got
I want you to tell people who is it for? Because I think when people hear like leadership retreat that was in the fall, okay, well, I am or I am not in a position of leadership. Therefore, it is or it is not for me. I want to dig into that.
Leadership is probably an overused term in that sense, but what it evolved out of was noticing myself and others who were technical high performers, and because of our technical high performance, we get elevated into positions of really delegating and managing people. Turns out people are not predictable. I could always wrangle Revit to do what I wanted it to do. I can fail quietly, work in a hotel room at night, struggle, figure it out. You can't. So Revit, you could do things with trial and error as long as you weren't breaking the project and it would work. Trial and error with people that you're delegating to doesn't work. You have to, I think to be a good leader, as Randy says, you have to take a beat. You have to accept information and not jump to judge about what the information means. It's not bad news or good news. It's like, oh yeah, we can figure that out. That shift in behavior is not intuitive. And there's no shortage of technical people that, well, even if you're right, you don't have to be an asshole about it from a technical standpoint. And so I think what we aspire to do in a leadership environment is create the mind space of leadership of self and others so that you don't jump to conclusions, you don't jump to judgment, you don't say the first thing that comes to mind. You're trying to be quiet and listen, engage. And in most cases, people will figure out for themselves if you ask enough questions in a group, instead of the technical leader saying, oh, this is the right way to do it and imposing it. Pulling out the information from the team. So that mind space of being a better leader, better manager, I think ultimately is a really important part of the business. I've noticed that people don't stick around if they like what they do, but they don't enjoy the people they're working with. It's not a good fit. So trying to create an environment for business where you enjoy what you do and you also enjoy the people you're working with is important. And then in context with that, creating an environment where people can have best practice discussions for large businesses, for small businesses. I went through some of the classes or some of the proposals with you. One company or one presentation that's been proposed is when to decide to develop solutions in-house versus off the shelf. Another presentation discussion that's been proposed is how do you actually motivate people that just don't want to be technically proficient? What to do as a technology director where someone they're just so reticent to step up. You can't force behavior. So we're trying to create an environment where we can reflect on leadership best practices, but also technical best practices. And I think they ultimately spill into each other.
Yeah, one of the issues that you have kind of enumerated in the past is you're a technical manager or a technical doer in a firm, and you get elevated into a position of leading teams, right? Which you spoke about a minute ago, and kind of having to deal with the people side of things without the explicit kind of training that maybe could or should come along with that, right? There's just kind of maybe an expectation that you were good at that and now you're just naturally going to be good at this. And with right. And it's like, yeah, probably not, right? Like probably not. And so then you're in this position just left wondering, like, how do I deal with this? I don't have the skills to do this. Yeah. This is actually a place to talk to people who have done it and have those without the pressure of speaking to your superior, right? Who's saying, you should know how to do this or you have to figure this out and we don't have time to do it on the job. Like, this is actually a place you can go have those kinds of conversations that are... And the depth at which you can go to in these kind of conversations, I think it's very freeing to be able to do that in a place like this because there's not all of the pressure.
There have also been conversations for those of us, I would say older, I'm 60 this year, where those of us who are older and have a bit of kind of experienced failure about what you shouldn't do. I think there's a group of us that's after last year's leadership event that said, in the past we were like, yeah, don't bring the young BIM managers here. We want to talk about leadership issues or stress issues. and not have them listen in. And then where the bit flipped was someone said, we have a lot that we could share. So the younger BIM managers that are, let's say we're in our 50s and 60s and we want to hand this off and we have experience to share. That's where, having, I would say the younger, it's the 30s and the 40s, the people that are technically proficient or production proficient, and they need they still need good technical chops, but they're also being nudged into positions of management and leadership. And you can't figure that out through trial and error. You just need a vector. And so I think we're kind of opening it up that as well, so that those of us who have experience can share that to the next generation. And they'll learn, as you say, anyone can learn from their own mistakes. The real trick is learning from someone else's mistakes. So we're in a good position of sharing our mistakes so someone doesn't have to learn from their own.
Yeah. Well, okay, so the event is, you said it's a Monday through Friday, is that right?
Last week of September, so we're talking about September 27th through October 2nd.
And it's near Gainesville, between Gainesville and Jacksonville.
GNV is the closest airport. I think it's about 20-minute Uber away. Jacksonville is about an hour. If somebody needs to, it's stressful trying to fly West Coast to East Coast on a Sunday. So I tell people, just fly it on a Saturday if you need to, come in late on a Saturday. It's better than coming in late on a Sunday because we start early on Monday. And we don't charge for that. That's okay.
Nice. I recommend that too. As a West Coaster. Yeah, I think because I came in, I was one of those people who got there late on a Sunday night, and it's like, Monday morning you're going to go paddling, right? But it's not like you're jumping right into a class, but it is nice to switch time zones gracefully.
Right. If you come in early, come in a little late, you don't have to get up first thing in the morning on a Sunday to try fly from the West Coast. Yeah, you can sleep in and leave on a Saturday. Yeah, and that's okay. It'll work. Yeah, so we're a little more casual about that. We're a little less formal, but we're professional about it. We want people to enjoy themselves and come back another year. And if we ever, I don't know that it's necessary to do this twice a year. We would aspire to do this. If we were going to do it twice a year, we do it in another hemisphere. So we take a fall event here and then have a fall event there, which would be springtime here. And maybe that's how it organically, how the cellular division occurs if it's meant to. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So the website is aecacoustics.com.
It is. I should know this.
You should know this.
AECacoustics.com.
All right.
And it has nothing to do with architectural acoustics. Stop being so literal, people. Why are you doing an event on acoustics? Seems very niche.
We did sound.
AEC Acoustics is an homage to the unplugged version of the electric plugged-in version events that we all love and go to, but we wanted something that was quieter. Yeah, so acoustics, AEC Acoustics.
And it is. I would say it is an unplugged feeling event, and which is really nice, right? Of course, you still have time to check your email and stuff, right? But for the most part, you get to unplug, and
we still have Wi-Fi. Come on, Evan. It's not like we have air conditioning and Wi-Fi. Yeah, but it is.
You can do it while you're standing in the lake if you want, though. Right?
You can. Yeah, the Wi-Fi. There's a Wi-Fi connection down by the lake, but. I think it's different in that sense. I always feel a little bit exhausted at the end of a week that I've lived indoors. The only time you go outdoors is when you're walking from a venue to your hotel.
Yeah, right.
And so 50 people is I think it was Mark Schmeeding that said he wanted the event to develop in such a way where he never had to turn around to see someone speaking. Like everyone should be able to be in that space and easily interact during technical sessions, during roundtable sessions. And it's also evolved because if you wanted to do this a decade ago and have a room full of people, you've got a projector, you've got AV, it's expensive technically. You can buy like an 8 or 9 foot flat screen TV for under $1,000. And we've had to do that in the past because the camp didn't have a big flat screen TV. So we went and bought one and then just donated it to the camp. And so now, 50 people can sit in a room and see a giant 8-foot screen if there's a technical presentation.
Yeah.
So the technology has come a long way as well. So we still have an event where we could be technically proficient without having a big 4K projection screen, all of that noise. Have quiet for a week.
Yeah. Well, I'll put a link to that in the show notes for the episode. And of course, you can reach out to Phil. I'll put Phil's contact info, LinkedIn in the show notes as well. So you can reach out if you have any questions. But highly recommended. I think it's one of the best conferences there is in this space. And that I think that says a lot to the quality of the conversations and the people who show up to things like these. When I went, it blew me away. It was really, really well done. So it's going to be amazing this year. And combining the two events, I think, is a good call. And I'm excited to hear how that goes. So thanks, Phil. That's going to be great.
Thanks, Evan. Good to see you.
All right. If you watched all the way to the end, thank you. That actually means a lot. I have 2 things I'd ask of you before you go. 1, hit subscribe right now if you haven't already. It's totally free. It takes 1 click, and I'm really trying to get to 1,500 subscribers. We're not there yet, and every single one counts. If this show has been worth your time, that's the easiest thing you can do. Number 2, if you want to go further, if you want to support independent coverage of this industry and get ad-free episodes of the podcast, plus my full Leadership Edge newsletter, head over to trxl.co and click the join button. The link is in the show notes. $12 a month, and you'll be one of the people who actually makes this possible. All right, that's a wrap. Subscribe, share it with someone who would get it, and I'll see you in the next one.